Imagine for a moment that you are the wife or child of one of the most powerful men in Nazi Germany. The war ends, the Third Reich collapses, and suddenly the name that once commanded fear across Europe becomes a curse that you cannot escape. This is not a hypothetical. This is the story of what happened to the family of Heinrich Himmler, the head of the SS, one of Hitler's closest confidants, and one of the primary architects of the Holocaust. What became of the people who carried his name after 1945? Did they change their identities, try to blend into normal society, or did they cling to his memory? Stick around, because the answers are stranger and more tragic than you might think. Before we dive in, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss out on future deep dives into the hidden corners of history. Now, let's step back into the ruins of post-war Germany and trace the lives of Himmler's family after the fall of the Third Reich. When Nazi Germany collapsed in May 1945, Heinrich Himmler was on the run. He disguised himself as a regular soldier, carrying false papers under the name Heinrich Himmler. But the British captured him, and just days later, he bit down on a cyanide capsule, ending his own life in captivity. His suicide left his family in an impossible position. His wife, Margarete, and his children were suddenly the relatives of one of history's most infamous men. Margarete Himmler, known as Marga, had married Heinrich back in 1928. She was deeply devoted to the Nazi cause, so much so that she once wrote in her diary that her husband was the best man in the world for his loyalty to Adolf Hitler. Together, they had one daughter, Gudrun, born in 1929. But Himmler was not a faithful husband. Throughout much of his marriage, he kept a mistress, Hedwig Potthast, with whom he had two illegitimate children, a son named Helga and a daughter named Nanette. So, when the war ended, there wasn't just one Himmler family. There were two. The Allies, of course, weren't going to let the relatives of Heinrich Himmler walk away untouched. In May 1945, Marga and her daughter Gudrun were arrested by American forces. They were held in various internment camps while Allied investigators tried to determine just how much they knew about Himmler's crimes. Imagine being just 16 years old, like Gudrun was, and having to sit in interrogation rooms where officers demanded to know if your father told you about mass murder, about concentration camps, about the machinery of genocide. Gudrun denied it all. She insisted she knew nothing, and to this day, no evidence has ever surfaced proving that Himmler's daughter was aware of the full scale of his crimes. But she did know enough to remain loyal to her father's image until her dying day. Marga, meanwhile, was a committed Nazi. She tried to defend her husband's reputation, portraying him as a man who had only done his duty to Germany. The Allies weren't buying it. Though she wasn't formally prosecuted for war crimes, she and her daughter were kept in custody until 1948, when they were finally released. By then, they were destitute, shunned, and despised. And here's where the story takes a darker twist. Most families of Nazi leaders tried to distance themselves from their infamous relatives. Some changed their names, others denied their pasts. But Gudrun Himmler did the exact opposite. After her release, Gudrun became deeply involved in neo-Nazi networks across West Germany. She worked with groups that helped former SS officers, raising money and organizing legal defense funds for men accused of war crimes. She even joined an organization called Stille Hilfe, Silent Help, a secretive group that assisted ex-Nazis in avoiding justice. In fact, Gudrun would spend decades defending the legacy of her father, refusing to accept the truth about his crimes. She publicly claimed that Heinrich Himmler had been betrayed, that he never would have supported the Holocaust, and that history had smeared his name. To put it bluntly, she lived her life as one of the most unapologetic Nazi loyalists of the post-war era. She also became something of a celebrity within neo-Nazi circles. For far-right extremists, she was a living link to the Third Reich, a direct connection to the man who once commanded the SS. To mainstream society, however, she was a pariah. She lived quietly in Munich, never marrying, never having children, but always defending her father's memory. She finally died in 2018 at the age of 88, still unrepentant. But what about Himmler's other family? The children of his mistress, Hedwig Potthast? Their story is very different. Helga and Nanette Potthast grew up in the shadow of their father's legacy, but chose a path of silence rather than defiance. Unlike Gudrun, they did not publicly champion Heinrich Himmler. They lived low-profile lives, avoiding the spotlight and rarely, if ever, speaking about their father. Most of what we know about them comes from scattered records and the occasional interview. Helga, for example, became a doctor, and Nanette moved abroad, living quietly and staying far away from politics. They did not deny who their father was, but they also did not embrace him. They seemed to understand that carrying the name Himmler was more of a burden than a badge of honor. Their mother, Hedwig, lived until 1997, never marrying again after Himmler's death. She kept her distance from public life and raised her children in relative obscurity. The contrast between Gudrun and the Potthast children couldn't be sharper. On one side, a daughter who glorified her father until the very end. On the other, children who disappeared into anonymity, quietly rejecting his place in history without making public statements. It's almost as though Himmler's fractured personal life left behind two very different legacies, one of denial and devotion, the other of silence and shame. And then, of course, there was Margarete. After her release in 1948, she too faded into obscurity. She lived in Germany until her death in 1967, still loyal to her husband's memory. She never remarried, and she never publicly criticized the Nazi regime. For her, Heinrich Himmler remained the man she had once adored, not the architect of the Holocaust. So what happened to Himmler's family after World War II? Some tried to defend him, some tried to forget him, but none of them could ever escape the shadow of his crimes. Gudrun Himmler, in particular, stands out as an unsettling reminder that even after the defeat of Nazi Germany, the poisonous ideology did not disappear. It lived on, nurtured by those who refused to let go of the past. It's tempting to imagine that history always ends neatly, with justice served and lessons learned. But the story of Himmler's family shows us otherwise. Sometimes the past refuses to die. Sometimes it lingers on in the memories and loyalties of those who cannot let go. And in that way, the Himmler family's story is not just about them, it's about the haunting persistence of history itself. If you made it this far, I want to hear from you. Do you think the children of infamous figures should be judged by their parents' actions, or should they be allowed to start fresh without the burden of history? Let me know what you think in the comments below. And if you found this video informative, make sure to hit that like button, share it with a friend, and subscribe to the channel. Don't forget to ring the notification bell so you never miss our next deep dive into the past. Thanks for watching, and remember, history never really goes away. It waits in the shadows for us to uncover it again.